Welcome to the Men After God podcast, where you will be challenged and encouraged as you pursue God, achieve success, and raise a thriving family. Join your host, Dustin, and his guests on a weekly journey to grow as husbands, fathers, and men after God. Here is your host, Dustin Alley.
Okay, guys, listen, first off, thanks for being a subscriber. Many of you are founding members, and we are so grateful for you jumping on board early on to help establish a firm foundation for the Men After God podcast, movement, and community that we have got going. It has been wonderful to see the growth of our community, and not just on Patreon, but on Facebook and everywhere else. At the time of this recording, I know I looked at our Facebook community, and there's over like 400 and some people a part of that right now, and it's continuing to grow on a weekly basis. So thank you so much for continuing to listen, for continuing to support financially, prayerfully, and for sharing our content and telling people about us as we continue to try to get the message of how to achieve success in life with a thriving faith and family. We're going to continue the conversation with DJ here today, and he is talking. I want him to talk about five principles for positive communication. Now, DJ, what is it that you mean for positive communication?
You know, when my wife and I first got married and we were thinking about what it means to speak positively, I think my view of positive would have been speak kindly, be gracious, always speak the truth, those types of concepts when it comes to being positive. We if you don't have anything good to say, don't say it at all. But the reality is, Dustin, sometimes in marriage, we have to say things that can come across as harsh, or we have to confront our spouse over something that they have done that's been hurtful to you. I mean, imagine if you went through your marriage and you never had a hard conversation. And by the way, there are couples that do that.
Wow.
And I regularly see them in my office for marital counseling, and often they don't make it because they don't know how to have any type of conversation that deals with difficult things. So we're not talking about we're not talking about avoiding difficult topics. So when I talk about positive communication, we're talking about communicating specifically a hurt or a problem or a difficulty, communicating that to your spouse, and here's the key, in a way that brings them along to understand your position. Okay. Now that's powerful, because so often in marital communication, we want to communicate in a way that expresses our hurt, expresses our feelings, expresses our pain, but we can do that in ways that actually drives our spouse away. For example, let's just say, I'll come up with a random illustration. Let's just say that a husband regularly gets home from work, long day at work, takes his muddy boots off, leaves them sitting in the living room. And every night the wife comes through after taking care of the kids, picks up the boots. Well, finally, after 3 weeks of this, she grabs the boots, throws them across the living room, and says, "I'm sick and tired of picking up your muddy boots. Would you please leave them on the front porch?" Now, did she communicate that she doesn't want to pick up those boots anymore? Did she communicate it?
She did. Yep.
Yeah. But is he in any way going to be brought along to respond positively and to see her? You answer me. What do you think?
No,
absolutely not. And so an argument's going to ensue. And obviously, so as a spouse, when I'm hurt, when something happens that I have to, we're talking heavy conversations sometimes that we have to have with our spouse, being able to communicate that in a way that they understand my heart and I bring them to understand it. That's what we're talking about, positive communication. And by the way, that's the goal of marital communication, so that when I've been hurt, and hurts come in such a variety of ways. Our spouse can say something that we interpret as being hurtful. they can do something that comes across as being very disrespectful or unkind.
Mm-hmm.
And often those things feel disrespectful and unkind simply because we interpret them that way. They weren't intended to be that way, but the words came across as being unkind or disrespectful. And so we will have to sit down with our spouse and say, hey, what happened today in the car when we had this misunderstanding and you made this comment about me and not wanting to stop to ask for directions. Listen, I really do care about this, but the way that you said that, it came across, it felt very hurtful. So communicating that in a way that allows your wife, since we're talking about being men after God, it allows your wife to understand your perspective instead of pushing her away from your perspective. Here's another example. Just come up with another example. You come home after a busy day at work, and maybe you haven't, in your family growing up, there was an expectation that when you get home at 6 o'clock, dinner's on the table. But the reality is that's not going to be that way for everybody's home. Now, maybe your mom did that, but maybe your wife can't. And so after a couple of months of marriage, you just get frustrated and you come home and you say, I just don't understand why you don't have dinner ready on the table. And we communicate it in a way that causes hurt back to our spouse. So I want us to look at 5 principles that help us when we communicate with our spouses to communicate it in a way that brings them along to see our point of view. Because in the end, that's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want my wife and me, I want our hearts to be in unison over every issue. And it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right.
But when we communicate, that should be our goal.
The question I have for you before you jump into your principles, because I want to get those, because those are going to be vital to accomplishing what you're talking about. If you could sum up, 1 or 2 things, maybe 3, if you could sum up the reasons why we have trouble engaging in positive communication. So the guys that are listening can say, okay, no, I get that. I'm that way. Now let's get the principles in so I can make that work. What are some things that are preventing and usually inhibit us from having that positive communication?
Sure. Okay. Number 1, and I'll just come up with a few. Number 1, I think, is often we are simply blind to the issues that we are confronting, and we don't realize how our words are coming across harshly. We get in a conversation with our spouse and we're just blind to the fact that we're being rude or unkind. Now, my wife and I have sort of developed this code language, this code that when we are coming across, and it's just happened naturally over the years, when we are coming across in a manner that's harsh or unkind, often I will ask my wife, or she will ask me, this is both ways, is everything okay? And she's not asking that. When my wife asks me, DJ, is everything okay? Like, she's legitimately, her heart is concerned that everything is okay because I'm not acting in a way that's normal. Like, I'm not being gracious. I'm not being kind. My words are a little sharper than normal. Maybe I'm a little bit on edge. And honestly, normally there is something that has happened. Dustin, we're both in pastoral ministry, and there's not a day that goes by that there's not something that happens in pastoral ministry that creates some type of difficulty or hardship. And it's so easy to take the burdens of work, whether it's a job working for UPS, or you're a teacher, or you own your own business, or you're a mechanic, or you're an accountant, and you bring that home. And all of a sudden we allow difficulties and hardships to interact into that communication. And when we do, maybe we're blind to it. I would say another thing that can cause negative communication is in our previous life, and I'm talking in our early parts of our marriage, or maybe in our childhood upbringing, we never saw positive communication modeled.
Oh, yeah.
That is a very big issue. If you grew up in a home where dad was a yeller or mom was a yeller and there was constant arguments and fighting, which sadly does describe many homes that we face in our world today. There are people that have grown up never seeing positive communication modeled.
Yeah.
And so that can be a real hindrance and a roadblock. So those are two just that come to the top of my mind.
Those are great. Yeah. And I can relate to both those, especially the one growing up in the environment you're mentioning. That was, yeah, you described my home life there, and so that's something I know I struggle with. My wife and I have worked, over the course of our marriage at our communication, and are thankful for where we're at. Now I'm working with my children in the communication. So I know what you were saying a lot in the recording for everyone on the parenting aspect. I got so much value from that. So, but let's talk about your 5 principles for positive communication. Go ahead and you can, however you want to go through those, DJ, you go right through those and teach on them for a minute and let us be able to get some value for that.
Sure. So since we're talking about positive communication in the sense of bringing your spouse along to understand your position in an area of hurt or hardship, then I think there are ways that we can do that, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, that can either hinder or that can help in having positive communication in our marriage. And in the illustrations I gave earlier, I think the first principle is pretty obvious, that when we want to communicate something positively to our spouse, remember, positively meaning to bring them along in the conversation, that we have to choose the appropriate place and time. There is a time to have a conversation with your spouse, and there's a time to wait.
Yeah, in the military, we use the word tact.
Tact. Yes. There is a time when you recognize this conversation is not going to be helpful. It's not going to add to, and then there are times when you realize, okay, now is the appropriate time where we can sit down, we can have this conversation. The tensions have dispelled, a little bit dispersed. There's no animosity in the air. We can just have a conversation. So time and place. And that may mean you and your spouse going for a walk, or sitting on the front porch, or going for a drive, or being able to, it may even be, if you have children in the house, being able to say, hey, let's go discuss this. And you go to the back bedroom, you take a deep breath, and you don't have to do it in front of other people, because inevitably having those types of conversations where your kids are on the couch watching you, you feel like you have to defend yourself. And so you've created this atmosphere where nothing positive is going to happen. No reconciliation is going to take place in that atmosphere. So finding the right time and place really is key to having those difficult conversations.
That's great. That is so huge, because, and this carries over, guys that are listening, like, this is very important for your marriage. You can apply this everywhere, every relationship.
Absolutely. Yes.
Because DJ, what you just said about feeling like you have to defend yourself. And I don't know if you mentioned this inside of your framework there, but having the conversation in front of people, and then making a statement rather than asking a question. We'll go into things just making statements about stuff. And what we're doing is just building up walls to the heart, and we're not going to be able to get through for that reconciliation. Whereas if we just ask a question for understanding, it could change the entire dynamic, and a person doesn't feel as attacked.
And our statements are always going to be based on assumptions.
Oh,
and often our assumptions are wrong. So we are just automatically making things worse when we go into that conversation, and we just start by blowing them out of the water. Like we're going to get it wrong every time.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Let's keep going. All
right. So number 1 is time and place. Number 2 would be the words that you choose to use. And I know this sounds so simple, but I have found that in my marriage counseling that I do as a pastor with other couples, as well as I'm finding the more that I interact with people in the workplace, in our community, that I don't think people really understand the power that their words have on people that are listening. I don't think they realize that words matter as much as they do. And now, granted, number 3, we'll get there in a second, would be nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is very important, but words are very important as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be careful what we say. So I would encourage your listeners, guys, as you are in the workplace, as you are in your churches, as you are in your families, be very careful not to say things that are not true. Be very careful not to say things that you don't mean. And often when we speak in the wrong time and place, we use the wrong words. But if we will choose a time and place when we can allow our emotions to come down and be able to think through the actual problem and the actual solution, then we can use words that are intentional, that are clear, that communicate accurately our heart, instead of defaulting back to words of anger or words of trying to think or words of response, which so often happens when we get into those conversations. And like you just said, in the workplace, boy, this is so true. When conflict happens in the workplace, being able to step back and say, okay, let me make sure that my words are intentional and that I'm using the correct words. I would say in marriage, being able to use words that include we as opposed to words that are I and you. Because often when you have these conversations, you're talking about something that you have done that hurts me. But if we can make it a we problem, then we're in this together. We can solve this together. We're going to come out on the other side of this better, instead of it being a me versus you.
That's good. That is huge, because then that helps redirect all the energy towards the problem and away from the people.
Sure.
Then you can work together towards that. That's great.
So that leads us then into number 3, which is nonverbal communication. And studies have shown that well over 50%, almost 75% of the communication that we have with people when we're face to face is nonverbal. We pick up so much on the nonverbal cues, the posture, the facial expressions, the eyes, the mouth, the ears, our shoulders, how we stand. All of these things communicate so much. And I find that often as in our marriages, but in our workplaces, we don't take into account how the nonverbal really is communicating what's in our heart. My words can say, I love you. But if my words come out and my arms are crossed and I say, yeah, I love you, and I say it that way, well, I've said the same words, but the nonverbal has expressed something completely different. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to nonverbal, we really want to be careful that we are communicating grace and mercy and kindness, and we do that through our nonverbal. And I'll just say, for me, the biggest nonverbal I struggled with was eye contact. When I talk with my wife years ago, when we first got married, I found myself so easily distracted, and it was something I really had to work on. I remember one time my wife was talking to me. I was sitting in the living room watching ESPN. She was behind me in the kitchen. I was saying, yeah, uh-huh. And I remember she came over and she said, DJ, did you hear a word I said? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, what did I just say? And I had no clue. I had no clue.
Yeah.
So I had to learn and while I learned it as a husband, it has helped me so much as a pastor, and it has helped me in the business field and workplace. That when I'm talking to someone, get the distractions away, focus on that person, because it means so much to that communication.
That right there, that one for me, I'm very, very much, distracted and so church is probably one of the worst places. But I mean, as a pastor, people are wanting to talk to me and things of that nature, but they're wanting to talk to me. These people are walking into that office. Why are they there? Why is that kid running through that way? What's that person doing over there? Oh, that person's waiting for me. Now they're leaving. They're waving at me. I need to wave at them. And oh my goodness. Yeah. It's one of the worst places. That's something I definitely need to work on.
Sure.
My wife has got onto me before because I think every man alive can relate to the story you just shared of like, oh yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. Wait, what are we talking about? So, that's good. All right, let's keep moving forward, man.
Yeah, these last two, I'll kind of connect these together. The last two are we've worked our way through the first three. Number 4 is we need to be better listeners. Number 5 is we need to learn to trust. Now, we're looking at this specifically in the marriage relationship, but this definitely extends out into our work relationships as well and our church relationships. So number 4 is listen. We need to be better listeners. And boy, if Dustin, you've seen this is so obvious on social media. People don't listen to know or understand. They only listen in order to respond. Like they don't care what you're saying.
No.
They only care, can I pick up on something that I can then use as an argument in my response? And so we need to be better listeners. Face to face, eyeball to eyeball, listen to your wife, listen to your coworkers, listen to your employers, listen to your employees, and really learn to listen to what they're saying, not just their words, but reading their body language. Years ago, we had a situation that happened in our church, and I look back on it humorously now, but we sat, and I'm in my office, and we sat just over there at my conference table. We were having a deacons meeting, and I went around the table, asked a question, and nobody responded, or the answer was no. Is this something we need to talk about in church? And there were no responses. Well, come to find out, there were no responses because early in my ministry here, my deacons, my men were still learning to trust me. And so I didn't read the body language. Like these men said no, I just went on face value, that's a no. Well, a couple of months later, it came back to bite me because I realized that I had missed out on some nonverbal cues. I really wasn't listening to what the men were saying. And so learning to be a good listener is very important. But that ties into number 5, which is we need to learn to trust. And this is a hard one because when we communicate over issues in which we have been hurt in our marriage, we inevitably become vulnerable. And we don't like being vulnerable. In fact, ever since Genesis chapter 3, when man initially was naked, Adam and Eve were naked and they were not ashamed. Then there was sin. Then there was shame because of nakedness. The only thing that changed was sin. We do not like vulnerability because of sin. And we recognize when I'm vulnerable to my wife, there's always the chance that she is going to respond sinfully. And I say that, not saying that my wife does that, but I'm saying that's what happens. Like if I'm vulnerable with my coworker, I'm fearful of how they're going to respond to me.
Right.
If I'm vulnerable with a person in my church, I'm fearful of how they're going to respond. And they may respond negatively, but it's because of sin. So that's something we really have to work on. And so when we are vulnerable, we need to learn to trust what our spouses trust our spouse's intentions. There's nobody in this world that wants to see my wife succeed more in her life spiritually, physically, financially, emotionally than me.
Yeah.
And there's nobody in my life that wants to see me succeed more spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially than my wife. Like she wants to see me succeed. I want to see her succeed. So when we have conversations, I have to learn to trust that. When my wife says, DJ, can I share with you something that I'm seeing that I think is going to become an issue at some point? I better learn to listen.
Oh, absolutely.
Because my wife is sharing her heart. But then, along with listening, is being willing to trust that she's not saying that because she doesn't like me, or she's not saying that because she's angry at me. She's saying that because she wants what's best for me. And that's a point of vulnerability that's hard to get to in marriage. But if we can get to that point where we trust our spouse, then no matter what my wife shares with me, I can trust that she's coming to me with the right motives. And boy, it just makes communication so wonderful and freeing, because we can learn from each other and encourage each other without shutting down the conversation.
That is so wonderful. I had a pastor friend who was teaching at a conference one time, and he shared about how him and his wife were in an argument. And then he'll tell you, it's like, just the Holy Spirit gave him this one to say. But they were driving in the car and turned to his wife and said, "Well, I don't know much, but I know two things." And she says, "What do you know?" And he said, "Well, we got issues. And the second thing is we've got our whole lives to figure it out." And he said in that moment, everything just broke. The walls broke down. The conversation was able to be had. That vulnerability was able to be there to really express one another and hear one another. And it was because I think because it was just that reaffirmation of trust of even though I'm upset, they're not leaving. They're not going anywhere. And so
absolutely.
I love that. DJ, you've come with some phenomenal stuff. I want you to remind our subscribers again how they can hear your content regularly and get in touch with you if you're up for that.
Sure, absolutely. So Lori and I have a podcast called Better Together with DJ and Lori. And it comes out once a week on Wednesdays, and we talk about Christian marriage and parenting. And that's available on all the podcast outlets, but you can also find us. Our website is growingbetter.org. And we are also on Patreon. I think it's Growing B2G is our link. But we would love to connect with you on the podcast and be able to share with you some of the things that God's taught us in marriage and parenting.
And you said that was, I was typing up here. I confirmed it. It's patreon.com/growingb2g. Head over there.
Yes.
You've got a join for free option. You can jump into that. They've got a super fan thing. Go ahead and subscribe, support what they're doing there. And guys, as much as we can, I've been thinking about this just recently, and I'm going to be talking to my wife about it. You know, it's the time of this recording. It's the end of November, and we're going to the holiday season. And I've invested money in coaches and from different aspects of life for different things, for physical training, for as pastoring, and just I would call him a life coach, a leadership coach, if you will. I am a coach, and one thing I've been struggling with is when it comes to parenting and marriage is why am I not investing into a parenting coach or a marriage coach, something of that nature. I actually have done husband coaching, I guess is what you'd call it. That was a fun time. But I think that's something we should all consider is how are we investing? And whether it's a coach or a book or a podcast, whatever it may be, how are you investing in yourself to, I'm going to use the word perform at your best level as a husband and father? Or are you directing all of your investment into how you're performing at work or on your hobbies and neglecting some of these more important matters of life? Listening to DJ's podcast and engaging with them online would be a great way to invest into yourselves, to be a better husband and to be a better father to your children. DJ, thanks again, man. I've just thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. I'm going to be looking forward to having them with you again in the future at some point. And be sure to stay connected and hop into our Facebook community if you'd like.
I'd love to do that. I sure will. Absolutely.
/Men After God. Guys, if DJ hops in there, you got parenting questions, I'm sure he'd love to engage with you in that and just add some more value to the group there. So guys, thanks again for being subscribers. Thanks for praying for us. Just thanks for being a part of what God is doing through the Men After God movement. We appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Men After God podcast. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and keep up with the show by following us at facebook.com/menaftergod. You can also reach out to Dustin personally at dustin@seekconsulting.us with any questions or for coaching on being a man after God. Until next time.